I gave up my youth to build my parents' legacy, working late into the night, skipping vacations, sacrificing everything. But when my father died, they handed my entire inheritance to my spoiled sister and tossed me aside like I was nothing. No goodbye, just a suitcase waiting by the door. I stood in the rain, devastated, not just heartbroken, but erased, forgotten, replaced. They thought I'd vanish quietly, that I'd always be the helper, the obedient daughter. But life has a strange way of circling back, and I had something they never saw coming. My name is Emily. I'm the firstborn daughter of a family that climbed its way from a modest middle-class background into wealth thanks to a small logistics company my parents started when I was just 12. Back then, we were barely scraping by. My dad drove the delivery truck himself, and my mom handled the invoices from our cramped kitchen table. I still remember counting receipts with her at night, the smell of black coffee and printer ink filling the air. As the oldest, I naturally took on responsibility. I was the one who babysat my younger sister Jenna while my parents pulled long shifts. I was the one who made dinner when they came home too tired to cook. But more than that, I admired what they were building. I believed in it. So when I turned 17, I didn't go off chasing parties or travel dreams. I joined them. At first, I helped out during school breaks. Then I started working part-time after classes. By the time I graduated, I was clocking in more hours than most full-time employees, while other kids my age were planning college parties or backpacking across Europe. I was in the warehouse learning inventory systems, organizing shipping routes, sitting in on meetings, pitching new ideas, some of which ended up saving the company tens of thousands of dollars. No one ever asked me to. I just cared. Jenna, on the other hand, was the complete opposite. She was 3 years younger and had no interest in the business or anything that involved effort. She grew up surrounded by more comfort than I ever did. While I was picking up boxes and learning to negotiate freight rates, she was busy hosting pool parties, shopping, and skipping from one new obsession to another. Acting, painting, interior design, influencing. She dabbled in everything but committed to nothing. Still, I never resented her. I figured she'd find her path eventually. Not everyone had to follow the same track, right? And besides, I had enough pride in what I was doing to carry me forward. By the time I was 26, I had become the de facto operations manager. My parents still held the titles, but I was the one who made sure things ran smoothly. I trained staff, implemented new systems, and even negotiated a major partnership that doubled our regional coverage. Quietly behind the scenes, I had become the backbone of the company. But I never asked for recognition. I didn't need a plaque or a title. All I wanted was to know that when the time came, I would have a place in the legacy I helped build. Then my dad got sick. It started with fatigue. Then came the hospital visits, the hushed conversations in the kitchen, the nights I found my mom crying alone in the hallway. I dropped everything to take care of him. Cut back on work hours, brought meals, handled appointments, stayed with him through the chemo. Jenna. She showed up once every few weeks with a box of macarons and a new story about some guy she was dating. She couldn't handle the hard parts. I never judged her for it. Some people just aren't built for watching someone they love fade away. When my dad passed, I was gutted. I'd lost my mentor, my compass, my hero. But even in my grief, I believed no. I was certain that the years of devotion, of sacrifice of loyalty, meant something. So when the lawyer called us in to go over the will, I showed up in black slacks and a pressed blouse, still raw with grief, but ready to honor whatever came next. What came next broke me. My parents had revised the will just months before Dad's death. The entire business, valued at over $10 million, was left to Jenna. The house hers too. The cars, the stocks, the assets, all in her name, me. There was no mention of equity, no ownership stake, no letter of gratitude, nothing. Just a suitcase with my belongings neatly packed waiting by the door when I got home. My mother wouldn't even meet my eyes. She just said, "You've always been so good at starting over, Emily. I know you'll land on your feet," like I was a loyal employee whose contract had simply expired. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't cry, not in front of them. I picked up that suitcase, stepped into the cold rain outside, and walked away. In that moment, I felt like my entire identity had been stripped away. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a partner. I wasn't even a person who mattered. I was a tool they'd used and tossed. But they didn't know one thing. You can't erase someone who helped build your empire, and I had no intention of disappearing. After that night, I bounced between friends' couches for a few weeks, pretending I was fine, until even pretending started to wear me down. I had no job, no savings worth mentioning, and no family to turn to. Everything I'd built my life around had vanished, and yet the betrayal stung more than the fear. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the years I'd given freely, lovingly, being dismissed like they never counted. Like I never counted. For a while I wandered. I took odd jobs, waitressing, freelance admin gigs, even tutoring kids just to pay rent. And every night, when the world finally went quiet, I replayed that moment. My mother's cold voice, Jenna's smug silence, the thud of the suitcase hitting the floor. They didn't just take what I was owed, they rewrote the story. In their version, I had never mattered. One afternoon, about 3 months after everything fell apart, I was sitting in a dingy little cafe, scrolling through job listings on my cracked phone, when I overheard two college students talking about a logistics app they were developing for student moving services. It was clunky, half-baked, but the idea sparked something in me. I knew logistics. I lived logistics. What if I built something smarter, something scalable? I scribbled out a business model on the back of a napkin, and just like that, my brain clicked back on. Over the next few weeks, I pulled every connection I had left. I reached out to old coworkers, developers I'd once hired, even a freelance designer I met at a tech mixer 2 years before. Most didn't respond, but a few did. I poured the last $40 in my account into building a prototype, slept in a friend's basement, lived off instant noodles. Every dime went into this one shot. The company I started was called Nextport, a hybrid platform for smart freight and warehouse automation. And while my family had mocked my ideas about digitizing their outdated systems, I finally had the freedom to build things my way. For the first time in years, I wasn't working for anyone. I was working for something myself. In the first year, I failed. A lot. Glitches, delays, canceled contracts, rejected pitches. I lost weight. I lost friends. I nearly gave up 5 separate times. But then, Almost exactly 1 year in, I landed a deal with a regional food distributor who loved the system I'd built. That deal led to another, and another. By year 2, I had a small but reliable team. By year 3, we were in 3 states. By year 4, we were valued at $40 million. 40 million. Meanwhile, back in my old world, things weren't going so well. I started hearing whispers through the grapevine. Jenna had taken over the company, of course, but she had no idea how to run it. She hired influencers instead of managers, rebranded with a pink flamingo logo, and focused more on Instagram engagement than client retention. She even launched a luxury product line that bled cash and tanked morale. Within 2 years, the company started to crumble. Their biggest accounts pulled out. Layoffs hit hard. Their reputation was in free fall. But the final nail in the coffin, they tried to pivot into tech. Word got out that Jenna's company was desperate to acquire a logistics software platform to modernize their failing systems. I laughed out loud when I read the article. She wasn't just chasing a solution, she was chasing me. The same systems I once pitched to my parents that they had laughed off as too ambitious. And then came the email. Well, not to me directly. To my company's general inquiry inbox. Her name was buried in the CC line. But there it was, Jenna at royallogics.com. They wanted to explore a silent acquisition. No press. Full rebranding. Integration into their failing infrastructure. They didn't know the company they were trying to buy was mine. I stared at that email for hours. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I knew exactly what this meant. They were drowning. And I had the lifeboat. But I wasn't going to pull them out. I was going to let them climb in, and then realize they'd stepped straight into the hands of the girl they left out in the rain. I told my head of development to accept the meeting. Keep it vague. Play hard to get. Let them think they were still in control. Because the next move wasn't business. It was personal. The meeting was scheduled at a sleek co-working space downtown. I deliberately chose that location. Modern, minimal, nothing like the mahogany boardrooms my family once held sacred. A space where power wasn't declared, it was demonstrated. I walked in wearing a sharp navy suit. Hair pulled back, no jewelry except a simple watch. I wanted them to feel something the second they saw me. Not recognition, but uncertainty. A presence that made them wonder why. They didn't know who I was. When Jenna entered the room, she looked tired. Not the kind of tired from a long week, but the kind you wear in your bones after years of trying to fake competence. Her assistant whispered something in her ear before they sat down. Her eyes flicked over to me, no spark of recognition, no gasp, nothing. Perfect. They pitched their offer. Buzzwords, empty promises. They didn't care about synergy or vision, they just needed a lifeline. A company to absorb their tech gap, hide their inefficiencies, and shield them from collapse. I listened silently for 47 minutes. Not because I needed the information, but because I wanted to hear them beg in business language. Jenna fumbled through a slide deck, trying to sound visionary. She referenced trends she didn't understand, name-dropped partnerships that had already crumbled. At one point, she smiled as if the pitch was going well. That same smug smile I remembered from the kitchen the night they kicked me out. I leaned forward. So, let me get this straight, I said. tapping a pen against the folder in front of me. You want us to bail out your failing infrastructure, hand over our IP rebrand under your name, and in return, we get to be absorbed by your dying company. Her smile faltered. It's not failing. Our core market is just shifting. I raised an eyebrow. Shifting away from you. Her assistant looked up sharply. I'll take this back to my board, I said. We'll be in touch. I stood, shook hands, and walked out, leaving them in a room full of polished glass and uncomfortable truths. Back in my office, I had a team of analysts break down every inch of their financials. We knew they were desperate, but I wanted details. I wanted to see the rot in numbers. They had less than 6 months of runway. Their burn rate was astronomical. Jenna had leveraged company assets to fund her lifestyle luxury retreats disguised as executive team-building influencer partnerships with no ROI, a failed app that had cost them $500,000. I'd spent 4 years building something from scraps. She'd spent the same amount of time destroying a dynasty. Then came the next step. We launched a quiet counteroffer, but not to Jenna. We approached 3 of her biggest vendors, directly shipping partners, fulfillment platforms, and one of their key retail clients. We offered better rates, better service, and most importantly, stability. Within 2 weeks, 2 of them signed LOIs with us. The third, he happened to remember me from the early days. I always thought you were the smart one, he said, laughing on our Zoom call. Didn't know you were the one behind Nextport. I smiled, kept it professional, but inside something surged. Not pride, not yet. Power. And then the final blow, a name acquisition. Jenna's company had a premium brand name, sleek, elegant, recognizable, but their trademark was about to expire due to a filing error, a small mistake from an overworked legal team. We filed a claim the morning it lapsed, paid expedited fees, registered it globally. The next day, Jenna's company woke up to find their brand name was now legally owned by us. Panic emails, legal threats, cease and desists that went nowhere. They tried to fight, of course. They sent a lawyer to negotiate a buyback. But I didn't want to sell it. I wanted to use it. We rebranded one of our sub-products under their name, made it better, faster, cleaner. The market noticed. Within weeks, search results for their old brand were filled with our new product. They were officially erased from relevance, from reputation, from recognition. And that's when I got the phone call. From my mother. I let it ring 6 times. Then I picked up. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Older. She stumbled over her words, asked how I was doing, whether I had time for lunch. As if we'd just drifted apart. As if she hadn't discarded me like trash 4 years ago. I saw your name in a business article, she said. It's really impressive. We didn't realize you'd done so well. I waited. She finally said it. Jenna's in trouble. The company, it's not doing well. I was hoping maybe you could meet with her. Give some advice. Maybe even. No, I said. Silence. Then quieter. Please, that one word so small, so human, and yet it wasn't enough. Was I worth a please when you threw me out? I asked, voice steady. Was I worth a phone call when you handed over everything to someone who never lifted a finger? Her breathing changed. She didn't answer. I was never your daughter, was I? I continued, just the help. I was scared, she whispered. Your father? He made decisions. I didn't know how to stop him. And Jenna, she was struggling. So was I said. You just didn't care. She cried. I listened. But I didn't comfort her, because I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was something else now. When I hung up the phone, a strange, calm washed over me. I wasn't angry anymore, not exactly. I was focused. Everything that had happened, every betrayal, every cold shoulder had led me to this moment. I realized that revenge wasn't about petty payback. It was about reclaiming my power and proving first to them and then to myself that I was more than the discarded daughter. I was the woman who would rewrite her story on her own terms. The first step was the brand name. Owning it wasn't just a legal victory, it was a psychological one. Jen and my parents thought they had silenced me, but with that name, I now had the loudest megaphone in the room. We launched a new marketing campaign overnight. It was sleek, bold, and unapologetic, the exact opposite of the fumbling attempts Jenna had made over the years. We emphasized innovation trust and integrity values they had ignored or broken. The market reacted immediately. Sales tripled in the first quarter, and the media started picking up the story. The discarded daughter, who became a tech mogul, headlines like that appeared in major business outlets. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was front and center. Meanwhile, Jenna's company was spiraling. Losing vendors, losing customers, losing faith. The press started calling her the heiress who lost everything. Then came the meeting they'd all feared. Jenna reached out through a lawyer this time to negotiate a buyback of the brand name. They offered a fraction of its market value, desperate to regain a shred of dignity. I considered it for a moment. Could I have sold it and walked away with a hefty check? Maybe. But this wasn't about money anymore. I countered with an offer they couldn't refuse: a merger. My company would absorb theirs completely. But with one condition: they had to surrender control. Jenna would step down, and my parents would lose their seats on the board. The look on Jenna's face when she heard the news was priceless: shock, disbelief, then fury. It was the first time she saw me not as the help, but as the boss. The merger was finalized 3 months later. Jenna moved to a minor advisory role, stripped of decision-making power. My parents were forced into retirement from the company they had built, but ultimately betrayed. During the final board meeting, my father looked at me with something between regret and anger. "I always thought you'd understand family first," he said quietly. I smiled, the same way I had the day I walked into that pitch meeting. "Family first doesn't mean loyalty first," I replied. "I chose to build something real, something lasting. You chose convenience." After the meeting, I walked out of that building knowing I had taken back everything they tried to steal. But more importantly, I had taken back myself. That night, as I sat in my new office overlooking the city skyline, I allowed myself to feel something I hadn't in years: peace. The peace that comes from knowing your story isn't over, and that the next chapter is yours to write. The day I stepped into the company's headquarters as the new CEO, I wasn't just walking into an office, I was walking into my reclaimed life. The faces that once ignored me now looked up with a mixture of surprise and respect. But it wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving to myself that I was enough. My parents sat in the front row during the press conference, their expressions unreadable. Jenna stood silently beside them, no longer the spoiled heir, but a humbled shadow of who she once was. I took the microphone, heart steady, voice clear. "I was once the daughter They cast aside the one they thought would fade into silence, I began. But I'm here today, not as their daughter, but as the woman who built a future they couldn't imagine. There was a pause. Then the room filled with applause, not just for me, but for the story of resilience, the story of how someone refused to be defined by betrayal. Later, when the event was over and the crowd dispersed, my mother approached me quietly. "I'm sorry," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "We were wrong." I smiled gently, the pain of years melting away. "Thank you for saying that, but the past doesn't define me anymore." I turned away. Stepping out onto the balcony, the city lights sparkling beneath me. The storm of my past had passed, leaving behind a clear sky and endless possibilities. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't tearing someone down, it's rising above and shining brighter than ever before.